What's up, everybody? Welcome in to week 5 of the Lowdown. Big weekend in Atlanta. I'm heading over to watch the Braves and the Mets in a big NL East showdown with the division title on the line. So really pumped about that. And as you can see, I'm gearing up for the Braves game tonight. Max Fried against Jacob deGrom in game 1. But besides baseball, I just want to hit on last week. We went 9-3. The upset of the week crashed and burned again for the second straight week. We're now 1-2. Got to improve on that. 38-13 for the season. And with that said, to the games we go tonight. Pac-12 showdown. Number 15, Washington at UCLA. Both of these teams are undefeated. Michael Penix Jr. is the quarterback there for the Washington Huskies. He's a transfer from Indiana. Really athletic player, lefty. He's thrown for 1,388 passing yards and 12 TDs with only 1 pick so far. But a guy to keep an eye on in this game is their running back, Wayne Talapapa. Really averaging over 6 yards per carry, and he's a bruiser. Really good player. That Washington running game's tough, and their offense is tough. They can score points. UCLA, of course, they're coached by Chip Kelly. Dorian Thompson-Robinson, since he's been a quarterback there for about 10 years. Zach Charbonnet is a good running back. I expect this to be a high-scoring game, but I like Washington to go in there and get a victory. They're playing really well right now. I'll say Washington 38, UCLA 31. Moving to Saturday's early games. Number 4, Michigan at Iowa. Look, Iowa can't score. They scored a little bit last week, but their offense is pretty pathetic. Michigan's one of the high-scoring teams in the country. J.J. McCarthy's playing good there at quarterback. Blake Corum there at running back. I like Michigan to go in there and get a win and stay unbeaten and move to 2-0 in the Big Ten. I like Michigan 27, Iowa 20. Actually, Michigan 27, Iowa 13. Moving on, early game, Kentucky at Ole Miss. Look, Ole Miss is their schedule early on has been a cupcake. You know, they've had 4 they played Troy. Troy played them pretty tough, but last week Tulsa played them pretty tough. And I mentioned that last week. I thought Tulsa could play them tough. They always have pretty good athletes. Kentucky gets back Chris Rodriguez. That's a big plus for them. I mean, Will Levis, their quarterback's playing really well. Tavion Robinson is a big-time player at receiver for Kentucky. I think the key matchup in this game is going to be Kentucky's front and their linebackers against Ole Miss's offensive line because, you know, Kentucky saw – a pretty dynamic run game and a dynamic player in Anthony Richardson early on in the season, and they bottled him up pretty good. So I think Ole Miss's scheme this year is based on pretty much a power run game with Jackson Dart, quarterback, and Quinshon Judkins and Zach Evans there at running back. And Judkins was an Alabama kid, and how he didn't stay in the state, I have no idea. But I think he wanted to go to Auburn, and Auburn said no. So, and, we all know what's going on with Auburn right now. So, I think this is going to be a tight game, and I even think Kentucky can go in there and get the win. And I'm going to go with Kentucky here. I'm going to go 27-24 Kentucky. Early game, Oklahoma and TCU. Max Duggan there at quarterback for TCU. Oklahoma's defense, I thought they were a pretty good team. Adrian Martinez, the Nebraska transfer, he ran all over them last week. Passed for 234 yards in the score and ran for 148 yards and 4 TDs. I know Martinez was always run of criticism there in Nebraska, but he looked fantastic last weekend, and that team looked good. I mean, they're aggressive. They got a good offense. I don't know how in the hell they lost to Tulane, but they did. But that's a dangerous team in the Big 12 moving forward. So keep that in your book, and remember that K-State is a dangerous team. With that said, I think TCU They're a slight underdog here, 6-point underdog. I think TCU gets a win. I just don't trust Oklahoma's defense. And TCU always gives Oklahoma a good game. So I'm going to go TCU 37, Oklahoma 34. Another early game, giving y'all some more options here in the early games. Purdue at undefeated Minnesota. Minnesota's playing good football. Tanner Morgan there's back at quarterback. It seems like he's been there for about 6 or 7 years. Mo Ibrahim, they're at running back, averaging over 6 yards a carry. Their defense has only allowed 24 points per game. Purdue does have a pretty good quarterback, Aiden O'Connell. But I like Minnesota here, and I like them pretty handily. I'll say Minnesota 31, Purdue 14. Heading to the Pac-12, 1 o'clock game, Oregon State at Utah. Oregon State gave USC all they wanted to last week. I know there was a lot of buzz around that game. It was a surprisingly a defensive game. But USC, they went in there and got a W. And that's, when you go on the road, especially in harsh environments, you want to get W's, and you'll take them any way you can. And I've said all along, I like that USC team. I think they're going to continue to get better as the season goes. Are they one of the best teams in America? I don't know that yet. I mean, I still think there's a lot of football left to be played and a lot to take in, but I do think they're a good football team. So, but Utah is a really, really tough place to play. I like Utah to pull out a victory here. They look like they seem to be clicking a lot better on all cylinders. But I think this is going to be a tight game. Quarterback Chance Nolan, he's a capable player there, quarterback for Oregon State. But I like Utah, but I think it's going to be a close game. And I'll say Utah 27, Oregon State 24. 2:30 SEC showdown, Alabama at Arkansas. Man, I don't think I've ever seen a field goal miss the way that one was last week in Arlington by Arkansas. Heartbreaking loss. There were some plays in that game that just bounced Texas A&M's way. Got to give a lot of credit to Devin Achane. That dude, he played his ass off. And one guy to watch in this game for Bama, the true freshman Jaheim Otis, he's a monster. I think this guy, adding him to their starting lineup, he started for the last 2 games, along with Tim Smith and Will Anderson and those guys up front. I think this guy, he's just so big and he's athletic. And I think he could be an X factor for them moving forward. And Texas pushed Alabama around a little bit when they played them earlier in the year. So you're not seeing that as much now. And I think going up against Arkansas's rugged offensive line, keep an eye on this guy and see what he does. Alabama's running game has looked a lot better in the last couple of weeks. We still don't know. I mean, beating Louisiana Monroe and Vanderbilt, you can't get a lot of intel off that. They have looked better. Ja'Cory Brooks kind of looks like he's the number one guy at the receiver position. Arkansas, KJ Jefferson and Raheem Sanders are a dynamic duo there at quarterback and running back for them, but their secondary is really banged up. So Arkansas is good at getting after the quarterback. So we'll see get some more intel anyway of how much Alabama has proved as far as protecting the quarterback goes, because in that Texas game, Bryce Young was running for his life a good bit. And he's not a big guy. So all it takes is one good backside hit on him and he could be knocked out of the game. So the protection of Bryce Young is key in this game. And if they get protection for Bryce, I think he'll be able to pick apart Arkansas's banged up secondary. With that said, I mean, the crowd's going to be off the chain. Arkansas played Alabama tough last year. I don't think they're going to be intimidated, but the banged up secondary is concerning for me as far as Arkansas standpoint. But I think Alabama goes in and gets a win. I think this is going to be a pretty good game. I'll go Alabama 31. Alabama 31, Arkansas 23. Rutgers at Ohio State. Look, Ohio State looked real good last week. They beat the hell out of Wisconsin. I mean, that game was over in the first quarter. CJ Stroud it looks like he's that offense for Ohio State's really starting to pick up steam. Emeka Egbuka Emeka Egbuka, the wide receiver. He's their top wideout right now. They also have Marvin Harrison Jr. But there's this kid, Tommy Eichenberg, linebacker, middle linebacker. Ohio State has a history of big-time linebackers that have come in as true freshmen, James Laurinaitis being one of them. But this kid is an absolute heat-sinking missile, number 35. So if you get a chance to watch Ohio State and Rutgers, and Ohio State's a huge favorite over Rutgers, but keep an eye on that kid. He's a good player. I like Ohio State to roll here 55-10. Big 12 game, Oklahoma State at Baylor. I'm going to go with an upset here right here. I wasn't too impressed with Baylor when they played BYU. BYU got ransacked by Oregon too, and Utah State kind of moved the ball at will on them last week. So I'll pick Oklahoma State. I like Spencer Sanders. They're at quarterback for the Pokes, and I like Oklahoma State to go in and get a win over Baylor. I'll say Oklahoma State 32, Baylor 28. Wake Forest at FSU, another interesting matchup here. Sam Hartman and them almost upset Clemson last week. The weather could be an issue. This is a Florida State favored by nearly a touchdown. I think Wake Forest can go in there and get them, and I'm going to pick Wake Forest to pull the upset here. I'll say Wake Forest in a wild game, 38, Florida State 34. 3 o'clock game, SEC, Texas A&M at Mississippi State. Got to give it to A&M last week. That was a hell of a gutsy performance. Max Johnson did what he needed to do. The loss of Anaya Smith, though, is huge, though, for Texas A&M. Devin Achane, I mean, he was off the chain last week. I mean, he's not very big, but he is fast. And the KJ Jefferson not getting in at the goal line there, that was a big play of the game. And the fumble, for a touchdown, that was huge. But I like Mississippi State here just because I think the loss of Smith at wide receiver, that takes away another weapon for A&M. Max Johnson played good last week, but he didn't play at lights out. So I just think Mississippi State at home. I thought them losing to LSU, they were in that game, they were controlling that game, and the muff punt was huge. And also the 4th and 1 call at midfield by Mike Leach that didn't work, which led to the muff punt. I just thought that they had chances to win that game, and they kind of gave it away. So I still like this Mississippi State team. I like what they do defensively. And again, I think Will Rogers is an NFL quarterback. So I've talked about this before, when it comes to, pivotal matchups, I like the team with a better quarterback. So I'll go Mississippi State here. I think it's going to be a good ball game, though. I'll say Mississippi State 24, Texas A&M 20. Actually, I'll change that. Mississippi State 27, Texas A&M 20. Georgia at Missouri. Missouri and Auburn, that was a pillow fight last week. And I just there's no way I just see any way Missouri hanging this game. Georgia's clicking on all cylinders. Heck, Brock Bowers was their leading rusher last week, and he's the tight end. He's the best tight end in America. I mean, this dude, I said it last week. I mean, I think he could be the best player in the country. I mean, he's that talented, and the kid's a hard worker. But he can beat you, catching the ball. He can beat you on jump balls. He can beat you now running the ball. I mean, Georgia, what they're doing on offense right now, it's just sick. I mean, and Todd Monken is just dialing up left and right. Of course, this guy used to coach in the pros, so he knows how to use players that are good players, and he's attacking all quadrants of the field. I mean, just what they're doing right now schematically with the talent they have is just off the chain. And I know that Kent State, played with them for a little bit last week, but I can rest assured that Kirby Smart has been putting it in their head. They better come out and play well next week or this week, per se. So I like Georgia to roll 45, Missouri 7. ACC night game could be an intriguing game. NC State goes into Clemson. I didn't think Clemson's defense could allow the yardage and points they did to Wake Forest like last week, and that kind of surprised me. So I watched NC State one time this year, and they have a good defense. They have a really good defense, and Devin Leary's a good veteran quarterback. So I think Clemson, they better be on cue here. They might get beat because this NC State team is pretty good. But I'll give Clemson the edge at home because that's a tough place to play. But I think this is going to be a heck of a good game. I'll say Clemson 23, NC State 20. Late game, Arizona State at USC. USC did what they had to do last week, and that's all that matters. Arizona State's a team that's in disarray. They fired Herm Edwards, So I'll say USC, and I think USC rolls pretty big right here. I'll say USC 48, Arizona State 13. And then Stanford at Oregon. All the Auburn fans, didn't and I'm going to hit on that game too. Stanford at Oregon, all the Auburn fans gave Bo Nix a hard time, but Bo Nix looks like a different player. And he's leading Oregon to wins out there. And I'll say Oregon rolls. I'll say 38-17. And then we got the Auburn. I missed the Auburn LSU. It's going to hit on that game. Somebody asked me earlier in the week, does Auburn have a chance? From what I've watched the last couple of weeks, I just do not see them beating LSU. And I think LSU is going to go in there and hand it to them. I mean, I really do because, Auburn, their offensive line can't block. And, they don't have a quarterback. Although Robbie Ashford, I think he has potential, and I think he is a good dynamic runner, but he hadn't really played a lot of football in the last 3 years. So I just don't think he's the guy that you need in there commanding the team right now. Although I do think he's better than Finley. But they just really don't have a quarterback, and I don't know the Calzada status. We heard he was going to have surgery, and they heard he was not. And so, but, I mean, you look at Jaden Daniels. LSU should have beat FSU. They should be undefeated. It was 2 muff punts, a missed extra point, a missed field goal, a blocked field goal. I mean, they should have beat FSU, and they look like they're getting better, where Auburn does not. Jaden Daniels is a really good player there, quarterback, dual threat. Malik Neighbors, he was the guy that muffed the 2 punts. He's really come on in against Florida State. He's really come on strong. And then they got Boutte. But the big difference to me in this game, I think Auburn's defense is pretty good. But, I mean, you can't be on the field the whole time. You can't. I mean, you're just going to get tired. But B.J. Ojulari, defensive end, number 18, watch him in this game. The dude is an animal. I just don't know Auburn's going to be able to block that guy. And they got a freshman linebacker, true freshman, Harold Perkins. He's a stud. He's a great pass rusher. I mean, so Jay Ward, their safety, he's a talented player. I just do not see Auburn hanging in this game. And I think it could get ugly. I'm gonna go LSU 31, Auburn 13. So wanted to hit on one more thing too as I close out. The Florida-Tennessee game last week, which no Cedric Tillman. He's had surgery on his ankle. I think he's going to be back soon. Of course, they got a bye week this week, so that's a big thing. They had some guy, Brew McCoy stepped up for them, there in that game. But Jalen Wright's another guy too that's pretty good player for Tennessee. Latrell Bumpus, linebacker, caught my eye last week. But one thing that I didn't understand last week, Tennessee was trying to run out the clock. Okay, Florida goes down and scores. They're down by 17 points. Then Billy Napier decides to go for 2. What? Why? Brian Harsin did something like this last year when Auburn played Mississippi State, and I think maybe the Texas Tech games that happened too. Why are these coaches going for 2 when all you have to do is cut the lead, kick an extra point, cut the lead to 10? When you don't get the 2-point conversion, and even if you do, you cut the lead, you cut it to 9, you still got to score twice. But when you don't get it, you basically have to score 2 touchdowns. I just don't understand. And they scored again late in the game, and he did it again. And then they get the onside kick, and they're at about midfield. You get one play, and if you would have just kicked the extra points, you could have thrown, a 20-yard pass and tried a game-time field goal. I just blows my mind, that decision making, and I'm seeing a lot. And I'm also seeing a lot. These teams are driving all the way down the field, on a good first drive or a good drive to end a half. It's mainly, though, I've seen a lot in the NFL, but I'm seeing in college, you drive all the way down the field, and it's 4th and 1, and you go for it. Why don't you just take the points, man? Kick the field goal, especially if it's a chip shot. I mean, because if you don't get it, more oftentimes than not, those, whether it's 3 points or an extra point, it will come back and bite you. And if anything, give your team a little bit of momentum. Because when you go down all the way down the field and then you get stopped on a 4th and 1, you've given all the momentum that you had right to the other team. If they go down the field and score, they really got the momentum big time. So I don't understand. It happened last night in the Dolphins-Bills game. Dolphins-Bengals game. Bengals drive all the way down the field, and they go 4th and 1. They don't get it. It just, you're at the 24. Just kick the field goal. I mean, and take a larger lead. I mean, I just don't understand it. And just keep an eye on that as fans. I mean, if your coach does that or another coach does that, I mean, if the other coach that you're a fan of does that and takes away points from their team, hey, good for you, man. Good for being a dumbass. But with that said, guys, good luck to your teams this week. Maybe I'll be right on a couple of the upsets this time and not crash and burn. But check out lowdownsports.com. I wrote something on the SEC rankings. I'm going to have an updated player rankings next week. I've added a lot of guys. And prayers up for the people in Florida. A lot of people have lost everything. So keep the people of Florida in your prayers. With that said, thank y'all, and I will talk to y'all soon. Have a good one.